Thank you all for being here, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you about cracking the manager code. Imagine, if you will, standing in the middle of the emergency room at your local trauma center. Amidst the chaos, you're watching one man, a big man, laying on a gurney with tubes coming out of his arms, wires off his chest, obviously in distress. In 1994, at the ripe old age of 36, the man on the gurney was me. I was in an alcove separated from the chaos out there by the curtain, but I could hear the noises, the sounds. I could hear the squeak of the sneakers as the nurses ran by to help the people that were groaning in pain. The hushed conversations between parents, doctors, nurses, and other caregivers. And that damned melodic, robotic voice that says, "Code blue, code blue." And you wonder, could this be for you? But as I lay there, I was thinking about all the unfinished business I had in life. The tasks I had left to do at work, the landscaping of my backyard, but most specifically, my 3-year-old son. And what it would be like to hold him in my lap and read to him. The curtain whispered back as the doctor walked in checking my chart, and he said, "Mr. Gragg, what brings you in here today?" Funny you should ask. When I got to my office this morning, I had this huge pain right between my shoulder blades. So I called the advice nurse, and she said, "You need to get into the emergency room. You may have had a heart attack." I thought, a heart attack? I'm 36 years old. Heart attacks are for old farts, people in their 40s and 50s, right? I came down here, they wired me up, and he laughed a little bit, and he said, "The good news is this, you haven't had a heart attack. But the next time you come in here, it may not end so well, so let's get a little history. Let me hear your story. What's your life like at work?" "Well, I'm the operations manager of a 24/7 refinery service company. And when they're leaking hot jet fuel, you jump and run. A 10-hour day is welcome. A 12-hour day is normal. 24 to 36-hour days happen several times a month." He said, "What's your eating habits like?" looking at me. I said, "Well, let's start with a pot of coffee in the morning, hot dog or burrito at lunch, and then with 2 liters of soda in the evening. The gravy is 2 packs of cigarettes every single day." He said, "Mr. Gragg, you've got to change your story. The next time you come in here, it may not end so well." I took the rest of the day off, went home and played with my son, and thought about things, and then I had this epiphany, which thankfully didn't require surgery to correct. And it was this: I was going to quit the coffee, quit the fast food, become a vegetarian, quit the sodas, and quit the smoking. And here was my fast-track plan. I was going to do it cold turkey that day, bam, all at once. I went to work the next day and survived, barely. I went to work the following day, and when I walked into my office, along this wall were my crew and my boss. And on my nice, clean desk were the following items: an ashtray, a box of matches, a pack of cigarettes, 2 liters of soda, and a steaming hot cup of coffee, and a book on leadership and interpersonal skills. My boss looked at me and he said, "No more." And they all filed out the door. I was in trouble and I knew it. I wasn't in trouble because I was a bad troubleshooter. I was awesome at problem solving. I was a good manager of time, a good manager of resources. I knew supply chains, I knew vendors. What I didn't know was I hadn't cracked the manager code. Fast forward to 2006, and I'm sitting in my home office. I'm now working for myself, and I'm working on the blueprint for what would eventually become Blue Collar University and yield several books, one of which is Cracking the Manager Code. And the phone rings, and Michael is on the other end. Michael at that point was in his mid-30s, and he says in this panicked voice, he said, "My boss is about to fire me." I said, "Michael, what's your story? Tell me all of it." And the long and the short of it is this. He had been born of parents that were absentee, and when they were around, they weren't the best guides. He'd had his run-in with the laws, paid his dues, gotten out, started trying to pull himself up by his bootstraps, got a job as a laborer, moved into a pipe fitting apprentice program, became a journeyman. He'd been married twice before with children by each wife. Now he's married to the love of his life with a third child. And he said, "I was such a damn good pipe fitter, they made me a manager." How does that work? It's, how do you know they're about to fire you? He said, "I've been a manager for about a year. I just got my annual review, and all it says is this: Michael has not met the criteria for being a manager in this company." I said, "What else does it say?" He said, "That's all." "Well," he says, "I got 90 days to get it together. Can you help me?" "Michael, what are the criteria for being a manager at your company?" He said, "I don't know. Had I known, I wouldn't have had this kind of review. I got 90 days. With a little coaching, little mentoring, hard work and discipline on his part, Michael not only succeeded at that, he far out exceeded the expectations of his bosses. During that phone call, I'd asked him, I said, "Michael, what does success look like for you?" He said, "Well, I want my kids to grow up and have a better life than I did. All of them, by all of my marriages." I said, "What about you personally? What does success look like for you personally?" He said, "I want respect for a job well done. I want my boss's boss to come into my office, walk around my desk, shake my hands and say, 'Good job.'" We all have a story. I have a story, Michael had a story, and you have a story. How do we know you have a story? If you're in here as a leader of any kind, manager, executive, supervisor, you have a story because people like to talk, and people like to talk about their bosses, and when people talk about their bosses, they do what? Tell stories. The first question I have for you is the story that's being told about you right now the story that you want repeated? Do you want your family to hear that story? Do you want your stockholders to hear that story? Do you want your loved ones to hear that story? And if not, what is the story that you want repeated? And what are you willing to do to change it? If you want to learn how to crack the manager code, let's get started.